Russians.
This is a reason people shouldn't lie when they're in front of a congressional investigation.
Very serious charge. How far that goes and how it implicates anybody else is yet to be determined.
It definitely feels like there's an accelerating pace now.
Mr. Cohen, how are you feeling?
Michael Cohen is lying, and he's trying to get a reduced sentence for things that have nothing to do with me.
Fox on top of a Russia probe turning upside down. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto. Glad to have you. And the man who used to be called the president's fixer just might have his old boss in a fix. Michael Cohen cutting a plea deal with special counsel Robert Mueller, pleading guilty today to lying to Congress about then-candidate Donald Trump's efforts to close a real estate deal in Moscow during the 2016 presidential campaign. Never mind a so-called Moscow Trump Tower never came to be. This latest turn in the Mueller probe has some wondering whether this investigation will ever come to an end. What a world. Your world, and we are all over it. With Rick Leventhal in New York on Michael Cohen's plea deal, and Kristen Fisher in Washington on the closed-door hearing that some say sparked this deal. We go first outside the New York Federal Courthouse, where Rick Leventhal is taking it all in. Rick.
And Neil, when we first got the tip early this morning to head down to this courthouse, we were told simply it was USA versus John Doe. Well, John Doe turned out to be Michael Cohen, who apparently spoke to Mueller's investigators for some 70 hours, which led up to the guilty plea entered in court here this morning. One count for lying to the Senate Special Committee on Intelligence in a letter and at a hearing back in August 2017 regarding the timeline of his and then candidate Trump's interactions on a potential real estate deal in Russia. Cohen told Congress that all discussions with Russia about a Trump Tower in Moscow ended in January of 2016 before the Iowa caucuses and Republican primaries. But today he told the judge he lied, claiming the discussions actually lasted until June 2016 and that he had more talks with President Trump when he was still a candidate than previously admitted. Cohen also says that he lied to Congress to keep up with the political messaging and out of loyalty. Cohen also admitted lying to another judge when pleading guilty to other charges back in August. And while his attorney says he's simply doing the right thing now, the president says Cohen is still a liar.
If Cohen is such a bum, why did you hire him, have him on your payroll for 12 years, and have him do so much of your dirty work?
Because a long time ago, he did me a favor. A long time ago, he did me a favor.
Cohen faces up to 5 years in prison on this charge. He's due back in court on December 12th when he's also expected to face a sentence on the other charges that he pled guilty to back in August, Neil.
Incredible. All right, Rick, thank you very much. In the meantime, Michael Cohen's plea deal stemming actually from a closed-door hearing with the Senate Intelligence Committee back in October of last year. Kristen Fisher in Washington, D.C. with the latest on that. Hey, Kristen.
Hey, Neil. Well, President Trump and his personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, say that Michael Cohen is lying to try to get a reduced sentence. But it's pretty clear that the special counsel, Robert Mueller, believes he's telling the truth. Otherwise, he wouldn't have offered him this new plea deal, which is his second plea deal in just 4 months. Well, today he pleaded guilty to lying to Congress about the timing and the president's personal involvement in that Trump Tower real estate project in Russia. The timing is really critical here because Cohen is now saying that this project was actively being discussed with the president's knowledge throughout most of the 2016 campaign, that it had not stopped before the Iowa caucuses, which is what he told Congress. Now, again, the president says Cohen is lying, but he also said this as he was leaving the White House. Listen.
Even if he was right, it doesn't matter because I was allowed to do whatever I wanted during the campaign. I was running my business, a lot of different things during the campaign.
The top Democrat on one of the committees that Cohen has admitted to lying to, Senator Mark Warner, he says he now wants Cohen to come back and testify again, and this time tell the truth.
Just remarkable that you had the president's personal lawyer still dealing on a Trump Tower project through the whole campaign, and it appears even into 2017.
Now, remember, this is all coming just 1 week after President Trump submitted his written answers to the special counsel's office. But Rudy Giuliani says he's confident that there are no contradictions between what Cohen said today and what the president said in those answers, Neil.
All right, Kristen, thank you very, very much. Let's get the read on all of this from former federal prosecutor John Lara. John, already we're hearing folks say at the very least it means this thing drags on a while, does it?
It does, but I have a completely different read on it. I was shocked by how inconsequential this charge is. It has nothing to do with Russian collusion, nothing to do with people in the campaign aware of things going wrong with Russia. In fact, this is the equivalent of jaywalking under a federal statute, a federal prosecution. So I'm quite shocked at how little Mueller has. One other thing that's worth mentioning, under Department of Justice policy, you have to plead to the most serious charge that the government is aware of. If Mueller had the goods on something in the campaign linking Cohen to some kind of Russian involvement, then he would have had to plead guilty to that. The fact that he did not, and he simply pled guilty to lying to Congress, says a lot, mostly about what Mueller does not have in the investigation.
It's a very good point, because what also is revealed here is this so-called Trump Tower that was going to be built in Moscow never was. Getting Donald Trump to go to Moscow to try to close the deal with Cohen never happened. So it would appear at just a surface level that there's no there. But am I missing something?
No, in fact, that's what I was shocked about. And you know, in the business world, Neil, these are very complicated transactions. In fact, nothing ever happened with the tower. There was only an initial letter of intent discussing the possibility of a deal. There were no contracts signed, no property identified, no marketing agreements, nothing. So really what Cohen lied about was a big zero. The conduct itself underlying what was going on is not illegal. The fact that Trump, as a private citizen running for president, wanted to build a tower in Russia is not illegal. The fact that Cohen lied about it to Congress is incomprehensible to me. Maybe he thought he was acting out of some loyalty to Trump, apparently, but once again, it has nothing to do with Russian interference in the election. Now, people are going to make a big deal out of it because it's Michael Cohen, but in terms of what the special prosecutor is charged with, looking at Russian interference in the election, this is a big fat zero. In fact, what it tells me is that he doesn't have any substantive information implicating anyone at a high level in criminal activity linked to the Russians.
All right, that we don't know for sure, but we do know that what the media was certainly pouncing on today was that there was talk of this Moscow real estate deal that was in the winter of 2016. Maybe around January was the latest it was. And then the revelation here is that he might have, that is, Cohen misrepresented this, that it carried on until June of 2016. There again, I'm saying, okay, is that a smoking gun?
Well, first of all, there's nothing illegal about it. He literally lied about something that was not problematic from a criminal law standpoint. Now, maybe from a political standpoint, Cohen didn't want that revealed. Maybe he felt it would have been embarrassing to the president. But there's nothing in his plea agreement.
I'm sorry I wasn't clear. This is my idiocy here. But is it? What am I missing? All right. So if he misrepresented the fact that these discussions started or were going on in early 2016, and he misrepresented that say they were still going on in June 2016, who cares?
Well, that's the point. The only reason that it's a problem for him is that apparently he misstated the facts to Congress. So therein lies the criminal charge. But again, you're coming back to my point, Neil. This is the equivalent of jaywalking, because the underlying charge, it really doesn't relate to anything that's illegal or against the law. The fact that Donald Trump, as a candidate, was pursuing an interest in a tower in Russia is not against the law.
Well, you're right about that, but already a number of Democrats have seized on, including former Clinton Chief of Staff Leon Panetta, that he was more interested, that is, Donald Trump at the time, closing business deals and enriching himself, I'm paraphrasing and very crudely, than running for president. You say?
Well, yeah, and that's not against any criminal violation. Once again, maybe that's an embarrassment politically, but there's nothing wrong with that from a criminal standpoint under the federal statutes.
All right. It's confusing, that's for sure. John, thank you very much for taking the time here. We do know that the back and forth on Russia continues, and if this is a president who is suddenly beholden to the Russians and trying not to offend them, then the president violated that big time today by canceling a meeting with Vladimir Putin. All right, this was a little weird because while the president was taking questions from reporters before boarding Marine One heading out to Argentina, it looked like a meeting was still on with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He gets on the plane. A few minutes later, we're told the meeting is off. Kevin Cork is in Buenos Aires with the very latest. What happened, Kevin?
Well, basically what happened, Neil, was the president had a bit of a conversation with his Secretary of State, his National Security Advisor, and his Chief of Staff. Listen, after he talked to him, he decided by himself, I don't want to do it, not going to do it for now at least. And so the president made the decision while aboard Air Force One to scrub the scheduled meeting with Vladimir Putin, at least for now. And I emphasize for now because, as you well know in covering these events, Neil's subject to change at any given time. Let me take it to Twitter, share just a bit of what the president had to say about it online. In fact, while he was aboard Air Force One, we had a chance to take a look at the tweet, and the president was making it clear that, yep, this meeting is, at least for the time being, off the books. He's talking in particular about what he observed happening between the Russians and the Ukrainians. I believe we may have that tweet. Let me share just a bit of what I have here on my phone. It says, based on the fact that the ships and the sailors have not been returned to Ukraine from Russia, I've decided it would be best for all parties concerned to cancel my previously scheduled meeting in Argentina with President Vladimir Putin. I look forward to a meaningful summit again as soon as this situation is resolved. The Kremlin's recent attack on and seizure of Ukrainian vessels in the Sea of Azov, prompting leaders in Ukraine to go so far, Neil, as to ask for assistance from NATO, imploring the organization to deploy warships to patrol the region where the Russians seized both vessels and sailors alike. Now, here's Russia's response. We can share this. This is from a spokesman to TASS. So far, we have only seen the tweet and in the media. We have no official information. If this is so, meaning if the meeting is in fact scrubbed, the president, Putin in this case, will have a couple additional hours on the program for useful meetings on the sidelines of the summit. By the way, I should point this out, Neil. Earlier today, we saw the president tweet about the fact that China is being hit with significant tariffs and how that is enriching the USA. But it's still the plan to have the leaders of the two largest economies in the world meet Saturday night. Be there. Aloha. China clearly hoping to end the trade dispute, but the president, at least for now, seems content to let it all play out slowly.
I really don't know, but I will tell you that I think China wants to make a deal. I'm open to making a deal, but frankly, I like the deal we have right now.
All that plus, we will look forward to trying to find out what happens with the Brexit vote and what that might do for the world economy and the standing of British Prime Minister Theresa May. And I want to add this last thing before I let you go. We have received word that German Chancellor Angela Merkel's aircraft has landed in Cologne. She was en route here to the G20. Apparently a mechanical problem, not known if she will continue that flight. Neil, back to you.
All right. Thank you, buddy, very, very much. So let's go to former USS Cole Commander Kirk Lippold on all of this. You know, Commander, in light of the Russian back and forth and then the Cohen situation today and whether the president misrepresented his ties to Russia, he would certainly have a funny way of showing this beholdenness that's out there to Russia when he cancels a meeting with the president only hours before a big summit. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's exactly the right signal. I think when the national security team got together, they briefed the president. Clearly, he made the decision that what Russia did was in violation of international law. Therefore, why aid and abet it? Cancel the meeting. There's always an opportunity to reschedule it. The snide little comment that came out from the Russian Foreign Ministry that they will have useful meetings, well, that just indicates that this wasn't being taken seriously by the Russians to begin with. So good call by the president.
All right. As a security guy who deals with the foreign elements and nefarious elements of that, and you see all the charges that have gone back and forth, and whether the president or then in Canada, Donald Trump had close ties with the Russians. Do you see anything in Donald Trump's behavior since becoming president, regardless of these charges, whether they're true or not, that would hint of someone beholden to the Russians and Vladimir Putin and trying not to offend them?
Actions speak stronger than words. And what President Trump has done since taking office with respect to the Russians and their behavior throughout the world clearly is indicative that he is not only not beholden, but in fact is going to hold President Putin and his regime to account for nerve gas attacks, for invading foreign countries and seizing territory, and these actions now at sea with the Ukrainians.
So let me get a sense of what happens at this G20 summit. Of course, if he doesn't have a sit down with Vladimir Putin, he does with the leader of China, and he is still talking tough on trade. In fact, with his very tough talking trade advisor, Peter Navarro, who will not suffer fools or lies gladly. This could be a pretty rough summit.
It could be, Neil, but I think what you're looking for is a president for the first time, while they may not like the language that he uses to get it across, is clearly saying that the United States is going to look at our national security interests first and foremost. And he's going to look at that across the full instruments of national power. He is going to take care of our economy. He is going to work it diplomatically in the meetings that he holds. He is going to look at how we convey that to the press and what's being done. Action speaks stronger than words, and the president's been very clear. He is looking out for our national security interests. And when you look at it, Europe, it's on their back doorstep in what just happened off the Crimea and the Sea of Azov. Quite frankly, the Europeans continue to aid and abet Putin by allowing the Nord Stream 2 pipeline to be done, by letting energy get into Eastern Europe, by Germany being beholden to the energy requirements that are tied to Russia. This clearly is a European issue that the United States is once again having to lead because the Europeans aren't demonstrating the necessary fortitude or backbone to demonstrate that they will not tolerate Russia misbehaving in the international community.
I get it on the Russia thing. It just doesn't jibe with how the president has been dealing with this whole Saudi Arabia thing. It was to the point where the Senate overwhelmingly sends him a message, 63 to 37, to say, we're not going to support Saudi Arabia in this Yemen war. We don't think you should either. So isn't that inconsistent?
I think what you're seeing is that Congress is, in fact, exercising what they're supposed to do. They authorize and they appropriate. That's the money that comes, and when the president has a foreign policy objective that he wants to do, and Congress doesn't want to allow him to do it, this is how they exercise their branch of government.
Well, they say that at least it's some response because they fear from him, Commander, no response, and it bothers them.
Well, I think they are seeing it, but I think you have to look at it again. From when I was on the program, when this killing of Khashoggi first happened, what you're looking at is the larger strategic interests of the United States playing out. While President Trump is very concerned, I'm sure, with how Saudi Arabia handled this entire issue, we have to look at Yemen, and it needs to be resolved. That country is suffering through a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and we in fact have to help the Saudis and the region by making sure that Iran understands there's a cost for their continued involvement in that war as well.
All right, Commander, always good seeing you, my friend. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Neil.
Before I want to teach something, I do want to give you a quick look at the markets today. Remember yesterday's better than 600-point run-up? We gave back only about 27.5 points of that. Now, a lot of this with markets on tenterhooks waiting to see a trade deal that could go in their favor and complete what has been relief over the interest rate situation, followed by potential relief over what's happening on the trade front. We shall see. Meanwhile, the Justice Department is going to be sending, among others, some marshals to the border. All right, we're prepared to send marshals to the border between Mexico and the United States, other folks as well. Generally, marshals are assigned to look for criminals. So maybe a good read on this would come and is in order here from Tucson, Arizona Border Patrol Chief Rodolfo Carish. Rodolfo, very good to have you. What will these marshals do? I guess we're going to have close to 3 dozen of them. What are they assigned to do?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on, Neil. The marshals are there is to support CBP efforts down on the border and providing border security. They're there to augment the resources that we currently have in place.
Okay, so, a lot of people are focusing, we had the dust up at the border and the caravan acting ugly and then the tear gas and all of that. But I was surprised, and you know this better than I, that incidents like these are way down from what they were just 4 or 5 years ago. But people don't know that. Can you explain now versus when this was much more heated and much angrier back in the Obama administration?
Well, first you have to understand that this is not a new dynamic on the border. We've had influxes in illegal immigration over the years. And if you look at where we're at now, is across the border, even prior to the caravan arriving, up 90% on the southwest border, 30% here in Tucson alone. Yeah. So we're contending with the traffic that's coming across, in addition to the drugs that are coming northbound and also the weapons that are being shipped into Mexico.
And what's interesting, this gets a lot of attention, especially in the Tijuana, San Diego area, a very populated area, a lot of cameras, a lot of attention there. But the fact of the matter is the use of firearms and all of that is way down from what it had been, no matter what region you're talking about. So what is going on here? What's really an accurate read of violence at the border or the use of firearms or more at the border?
Well, first of all, it's been an increase in the deployment of CBP resources that we've had down here, but it's also the close collaboration that we've had with Mexican government is to ensure that we have a tranquil and peaceful border. At the end of the day, you're going to have influxes of groups of people who come up here for nefarious acts, but at the end of the day, I think it's a combined effort of not only U.S. forces, Mexican agencies, and also state and local agencies who partner with us every day is to support us in the border security environment.
So when we make a big deal of tear gas being used, and yet there were in 2013 there were 1,168 incidents of tear gas and related incidents as well, 151 of pepper spray. This is back in 2013. These numbers, these incidents are in the single digits by comparison, right?
Yes, our agents used tremendous restraint in utilizing tear gas, pepper spray, or any intermediate force tool that they have available to them. But at the end of the day, it's as much as about protecting our officers and agents who are deployed down there. I think there's been a lot made of the fact is that you had the use of tear gas that was used down there, but you have to recognize that it was used for people who are actively assaulting our agents and officers in areas. They had an opportunity to present themselves peacefully at a port of entry, is to claim asylum, but yet chooses to rush and try to breach the border.
Yeah, when I see these statistics, I think your guys are due a break and at least a clarification of that. So thank you, sir, for doing that. And again, these statistics, again, are what they are. In the budget year of 2013, we had firearms used 45 times, and over the 11 months in that period, 7 of 43 cases of agents and officers using less lethal force, batons, stun guns, tear gas, pepper spray. That is, all right, get ready for this, brother. It's awful, I know. But you can add former Minnesota Governor, professional wrestler Jesse Ventura's name to what's becoming a likely very crowded field of presidential hopefuls. Here's what he told TMZ.
Seriously weighing a run for president?
Always in. The Greenies the Greenies have shown interest. The Green Party. I'll go to Mexico now and for a couple months coming up, and that's where I'll make the ultimate decision when I get down there and clear my head out of whether to do it or not. But there's a lot of factors that will come into play. See, I don't want to run and elect Trump.
All right. The irony there is that his run for Minnesota governor, which came out of the blue, stunned Donald Trump so much that, again, legend has it that it inspired Donald Trump to say, you know, maybe I could do that for another office. Who knows? Wall Street Journal's Jillian Melcher is here, GOP fundraiser and strategist Noel Nickpour, and Democratic strategist Antoine Seawright. All right, so Antoine, you got a crowded field, likely, and it's going to be a very diverse cast of characters. What do you think?
I think it's great. Look, I think the crowded field made Barack Obama a very strong candidate in the 2008 general election.
There was nothing crowded like this.
I know, but listen, competition is good for the marketplace. But there's two things I want to tell you about.
This is Radio City Music.
Let me tell you two things about the 2020 election. Anyone who is flirting with the idea of running knows that the road to the White House and heaven has to be stamped in South Carolina. So South Carolina will be very important. Hence Antoine Seawright. They also know that, here's what I've learned from doing this business, Neil. I've learned that leaders do not create movements. movements create leaders. I think the 2018 election for Democrats was a movement. And so we're going to see the birth of a lot of new leaders who will pop their head in the presidential cycle.
Might as well.
It's good for the country.
I think it creates opportunity for a wild card. I was looking at the Morning Consult poll. And the two top picks right now are Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. So I think that's the blue-collar vote that Trump swung, and then the millennial vote that Trump lost out on.
They have not.
But one of the really interesting things was their supporters kind of slipped on the end. But if you went further down the ticket than that, it was all over the place. So I think that what that tells me
they haven't come to South Carolina.
Again, opportunity for a wild card.
Well, but one of the things that I think that you're going to see in this large field, potentially large field for 2020 for the Democrats, I think that whoever wins that nomination, you're going to see what direction their message is going to be. Because right now they have a progressive message, they have a moderate message. Let's see which one prevails, because that's going to dictate where exactly the Democratic Party is going to go.
Had debates, like, at Fox and Fox Business did debates, and we had the adult debate and then the kids debate. It was called, was disparaged that way. And that was for a field of, 12 to 16 Republican.
We're going to have 20 to 21. Easy. But Neil,
I had a guy earlier on saying it could be 36 to 38.
Serious candidates. I think we'll have 18 to 21. But here's what people do not understand who have never done presidential elections. 60% of the people who will cast their vote in the Democratic primary, starting with South Carolina, will be African American. Super Tuesday, that number increases even more. So whoever our nominee is will be the person who will dominate the South. And let me tell you what's going to be key for who dominates the South.
So one person would have to break out of that couple of dozen pack.
They're going to have to break. And I'm telling you, South Carolina usually determines our nominee. But let me tell you what's going to determine.
But you're going to have to look at their messages. Like Howard Schultz is already putting together a deal, and he is focusing on the national debt.
I think you're right on that. I mean, this is an interesting moment, though.
Are you worried that it's too crowded, though? They're going to cancel each other out.
I'm not at all. Okay. I think it's good, because I think we have to get to the place in our party where we have a messenger and a message. And
well, for the Republicans dealing with Donald Trump, was that he effectively divided a crowd that thought he would sort of, flame out, and he didn't. Who on the Democratic side has the potential to catch on?
Well, I think one of the interesting things is, in the same way that the last election had the opportunity to change what the Republican Party is, this is going to be a moment of reckoning for the Democratic Party. I think there's potential for a real progressive wing to emerge. I'd be keeping an eye on Kamala Harris. I wouldn't rule out Elizabeth Warren.
Well, isn't California, they front-loaded their primary?
Cory Booker,
right?
yeah.
That's going to be tough for South Carolina to deal with that.
It will not, because South Carolina is a high-tech...
there are 49 other states.
I do know that, but I'm telling you what's important. South Carolina is a high-tech, high-touch. California is all the air-ground states.
All right,
so whoever has
that's
money...
a lot of delegates.
Whoever has money... California will be split, because if Ms. Harris runs, if Mayor Garcetti runs, and the congressman from California, they're going to split delegates. Not to mention other candidates have strong popularity in the state.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Somewhere you're going to have to get Bloomberg in the mix, because he is not only a major self-funder, I think that he has got the potential to change and play with message, because when you have that much money, and this is going to be an all-time, big-time fundraising year for 2020.
The most expensive ever.
Right. You're going to have someone like a Michael Bloomberg on that side.
Most expensive.
But it's growing and growing and growing.
Because of the number
I think Michael Bloomberg worries Donald Trump.
I think he does
too. He's calling him Little Michael.
Because he never talks about any. He goes, I can beat Joe Biden, I can beat Warren, but he never really names Bloomberg.
But
I don't know.
how does
the
it
guy
work
with
if
the
you
soda
have
tax.
well, whatever. But if you have a crowded field, does that favor the incumbent in the other party, or because look at what happened to Trump?
Look, that's my worry as a Democrat. Our convention is up sooner. Earlier than normal. We have a crowded field. There's no guarantee.
See, when I said the crowded field in the beginning, you dismissed it.
well, I had to think about it.
You kind of waved me off.
I had to think about it. But I worry that if we do not have a settled nominee, or if it's close by convention, we have a very divided convention.
Imagine that. You get to the convention, you don't have a nominee.
That could be trouble in the blue Democratic waters.
The Trump voter, too. Right. Some of these were new voters that voted for Trump. They weren't traditional Republican donors.
Who's to say they're going to come back out?
And a lot of them were Bernie Sanders voters who were impressed with the populist message.
That's true. A lot of Bernie Sanders, a lot of Joe Biden.
Yeah. a lot of people who earn oil from South Carolina.
The number one,
Pennsylvania.
whoever the top and whoever the number two will have to be two people who can bring the party together. I will tell you the most key ingredient to that success, and that is African American women. They have dominated the cycle.
I think women in general.
No, African American women in particular for Democrats.
African American women from South Carolina. Is what you
Oh my gosh.
God's country.
God's country. It is a beautiful state. All right, when we come back here, do you like low oil prices? They bounce back a little today, but you know there's a flip side to that. All right, for a while today, oil fell beneath $50 a barrel before rebounding on talk right now that Russia and OPEC, maybe they start cutting production. That lifted price a little bit, but you're already probably seeing it at the pump, and a lot of states, better than 2 dozen of them right now, have gas for under $2 a gallon. So what are the pros and cons of all of this? Here to hash it out, Gary Kalpom, the president of Kalpom Associates, and Price Futures Group's Phil Flynn. Phil, what is going on with oil, and should we be worried about it falling too much?
I think we can be worried about it. I mean, President Trump gave everybody a Christmas present. Gas prices down 50 days in a row, and he really engineered that price drop by hoodwinking OPEC. But if it falls too far, Neil, U.S. producers could be in trouble. They could start losing money and cut back on production.
Do you worry about that, Gary, or is the flip side good for the economy, good for consumers, good for shopping? All good.
Well, here's the great news. It's great for the consumer. If prices just stay here for the next year, that's about a $50 to $60 billion expense cut for the consumer, not to mention businesses. And by the way, one of the strongest groups in the market right now, by no coincidence, is the airlines. The issue is, with such a drop, is it meaning that demand is falling off a cliff around the globe? But we're seeing some problems in Europe with Germany contracting, Japan contracting. For me, it's not how much it dropped, it's how fast it dropped, and that's the worrisome part.
You know, it does make me worry as well, Phil, that if it is a sign of a global slowdown, or China hiccuping and Asia hiccuping and Europe stumbling, and we got some data out of Germany today without getting in the weeds that confirmed that, you got to wonder, wait a minute, there's a flip to this, right?
There really is. You know, sometimes you look at the oil price, it's really a barometer of the U.S. economy and the global economy. You know, a lot of times when the economy is doing great, oil prices are going up because businesses are moving, people are moving goods, trucks, planes, trains, automobiles, you name it. You know, and sometimes when we crash like this, it almost reinforces this mood that, hey, wait a second, maybe something's really bad out there, even though it might not be that bad. The falling oil price sometimes signals to business, slow down, you know, don't do business, because this oil price crash could be signaling a slowdown.
You know, Gary, what amazed me about the general market today beyond oil is that we lost only about 27 of the 600-plus points we gained yesterday in the Dow. Why?
I think the Fed has killed two birds with one stone. They appeased the president as well as the markets by putting a floor under it. You got to realize this is basically the #1 money man in the world, and he went from coast to coast as far as tightening to not tightening going forward, and that is meaningful. And if there's anything we know about the last 10 years of markets, markets love easy money and easier money, and I think he signaled that. But by the way, as we're talking, the flip side is, what is Powell seeing? Is he seeing the same things that I'm talking about and I'm seeing? And time will tell in the next few months.
Yeah, that's what I worry about, Phil. And maybe I'm just trying to balance it out, fair amount, you know, the bullish and the bearish case. The fear in me is that is the Federal Reserve is saying we're going to go slow on hiking rates because they don't see the need to. Normally, you were seeing the need to because things are picking up and you were very complimentary to the economy. Does that mean it's not so great now? What do you think?
Well, that's the signal, and that was one of the concerns. I think the Fed boxed themselves in. They had to raise rates in December, no matter what Donald Trump tweeted. They were going to have to do it. But now it seems like the biggest concern is that we're losing. The Fed could be losing independence. You don't want to see the Fed be influenced by the president to make their decisions, and that is going to be a concern, and it could cost the market to lose confidence in the Fed.
All right. Still too early, but you never know. All right, gentlemen, I thank you as well for all of that. In the meantime, how do you say tit for tat in Chinese? President Trump is set to tell Xi Jinping, you make life hell for our business guys over there. Watch the hoops. They give our business guys hell. Time to give their students who are studying over here a little bit of hell. The Trump White House is considering restrictions on Chinese students in the U.S. over growing concerns of espionage, according to a new report. The former State Department senior advisor, Christian White, on all that. Christian, I guess what's at play here is the administration wants to get a better idea of who's here from China, what they're doing here from China, and whether they're on the up and up. But it also is fueling, cynical talk that this is kind of like a tit for tat, the way China makes life hell for U.S. interests over there. What do you think?
I don't think it's not. It's been a long time coming, and frankly, this is just a first step. Better late than never. This is fairly minor. I mean, saying you're going to do background checks on Chinese students coming here, I don't know what you intend to find out or how you're going to do that without access to people in China, which the Chinese will never allow. Background checks are expensive. I think you should go farther and just not allow Chinese nationals to come here, displace American students, often Asian American students, and study technical degrees. Take that information back. The Chinese view these people as assets. They use them as assets. This is very dangerous stuff. It's a big cash cow for universities, but we're doing ourselves great damage.
Well, a lot of those technology executives are the ones who say, well, if we had a more generous visa program and more of them could get their green cards, they'd happily stay here and we wouldn't have to chase them back to China, you say?
Yeah, I don't think that's actually accurate. Again, they may have to pay more to have American students do this, but of course they'll make that back in intellectual property that's not stuff. And there's been this theory of educational exchanges that people will come here, breathe the sweet air of freedom, and bring our ideals back to their country. That hasn't happened with China. Students here are carefully monitored. You'll notice they do not generally engage in political activities because they know that will affect them or their families back home.
You know what? I was surprised in all of this, Chris, and you probably knew this already, but we don't really search much on the background of anyone who comes to this country to study anywhere, and that kind of stunned me.
It is. Again, background checks are very expensive, even to do them for people with sensitive government information. So just to do it for a student would be prohibitive, perhaps. But we should, first of all, not let our adversaries send so many students or send them to technical fields. But second of all, at least look at their social media, at least ask them their views on things and ask them their intentions. And then if you find them doing something inconsistent with that, at least it would be grounds to expel them. But you're right, we haven't taken those steps.
Well, they'll come right back at someone like Chris and say, well, that's racist.
That is patriotic, I would say. Espionage knows no color, skin color. And, this is, again, I'm sorry that Silicon Valley and our universities have been gorging at this trough and are upset that they may not get quite so much loot. But, again, empowering our chief adversary, which is based on stealing our intellectual property defense goods, it's just insane. And we ought to go elsewhere if we need these students. And ideally, these could be American students learning these skills.
All right. Well, watch how it goes. I still cynically think it might be a clever negotiating tactic on the part of the president who's about to sit down with Xi Jinping. We'll see, my friend. Very good seeing you.
Likewise. Thanks, Neil.
Think about it. Whatever you make of our educational institutions, we have the world's best medical technologies and services. Everyone who's sick abroad tries to come to the United States to get treated here. And yet, all of these advancements, we're dying younger in this country. It's happened again. American life expectancy fell again last year. Again? Why is this happening? NYU Langone Medical Center's Dr. Roshini Raj is with us right now. Doctor, it doesn't seem to make sense in a country like ours that this is happening, but it's happening. What's going on?
Yeah, there does seem to be a disconnect here. We are one of the most powerful economies in the world, and yet the healthcare system does not seem to be working. When we compare ourselves to countries like Japan or Sweden, who have a life expectancy into the 80s, we're now going down every year for the past 3 years. We haven't seen a decline like that since the early 1900s, and at that time you could point to World War I and a big pandemic of the flu. So why is this happening? There are probably a lot of factors involved. Today the CDC said that part of it is increase in drug overdose and suicide, but there does seem to be a larger problem going on here.
All right, so that skews the numbers for the larger population.
Right.
We have so many who are dying in the tens of thousands of that. That I understand. But it's bigger than that, right? I mean, we're still a fat nation. I understand that there's some people overweight in this country. I don't know where they are. I don't see them. But what is going on there? Because I thought we were making inroads there.
Yeah, it seems like we are not making as great inroads as we need to be. As you said, we are a sedentary nation, we are an obese nation, we are a stressed out nation.
Well,
and
careful with this, Dr. I mean, it's like you're talking to me, which you are, but careful. Go ahead.
I'm not speaking specifically to you at all, but yes, when we look again, let's talk about Sweden, where they have policies in terms of work habits, maternity leave, things that really do help people have a less stressful life. That
we can't calm down.
Yeah, we're a stressed out nation. Our portion sizes are much bigger than many parts of the developed world and developing world.
Back with the fat thing, doctor. Back with the fat thing.
Well, it all contributes to things like heart disease, cancer, all of these things are, they have risk factors that we can control. If we control our exercise, our diet, some of it is preventable.
All right, you're right about all. And doctor, you're a good sport as well. Thank you very, very much for joining us. And again, what the CDC does here, going to the doctor's point, is they just try to average this out and extrapolate from what they know now, what they think the average lifespan will be. A little bit north of 76 years for male, 81 years for female. So the gap has never been this wide between women and men. Isn't that interesting? Maybe I'm the only one who was interested by that. But, honey, I'm on my way home. The 5 is now.